Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 10, a new chapter, the battle between the demigods and Vritrasura. Verse number 1 to 6. Summary. As described in this chapter, after Indra obtained the body of Dadhici, a thunderbolt was prepared from Dadhici's bones, and a fight took place between Vritrasura and the demigods. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demigods approached Dadhici Muni and begged for his body. Dadhici Muni, just to hear from the demigods about the principles of religion, jokingly refused to relinquish his body, but for higher purposes, he thereafter agreed to give it up. For after death, the body is usually eaten by low animals like dogs and jackals. Dadhici Muni first merged his gross body made of 5 elements into the original stock of 5 elements, and then engaged his soul at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he gave up his gross body. With the help of Vishwakarma, the demigods then prepared a thunderbolt from Dadhici's bones. Armed with the thunderbolt weapon, they prepared themselves to fight and got up on the backs of the elephants. At the end of Satyuga and the beginning of Treta Yuga, a great fight took place between the demigods and the asuras. Unable to tolerate the effulgence of the demigods, the asuras fled the battle, leaving Vritrasura, their commander-in-chief, to fight for himself. Vritrasura, however, seeing the demons fleeing, instructed them in the importance of fighting and dying in the battlefield. One who is victorious in battle gains material possessions, and one who dies in the battlefield attains a residence at once in the celestial heavens. In either way, the fighter benefits. Verse number 1, we will chant verse number 6 together. Verse number 1. Shri Badarayaniruvacha Indram eva samadishya Bhagavan Vishvabhavanaha Pashyatam animeshanam Tatrevantardadhe harihi. Translation. As Sri Shukadev Goswami said, after instructing Indra in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the cause of the cosmic manifestation, then and there disappeared from the presence of the onlooking demigods. Verse number 2. Tatha bhiyachito dever rishir atharvano mahan modamana uvachedam prahasanniva bharata. O King Parikshit, following the Lord's instructions, the demigods approached Dadhici, the son of Atharva. He was very liberal, and when they begged him to give them his body, he at once partially agreed. However, just to hear religious instructions from them, he smiled and jokingly spoke as follows. Api vrindarakayuyam najanitha sharirinam samsthayam yastvabhidroho dussahaschetanapaha. O elevated demigods, at the time of death, severe, unbearable pain takes away the consciousness of the living entities who have accepted material bodies. Don't you know about this pain? Verse number 4. Jijivishunam jivanam atma preshta ihepsitaha ka utsaheta tam datum bhikshamanaya vishnave. Translation: in this material world, every living entity is very much addicted to his material body. Struggling to keep his body forever, everyone tries to protect it by all means, even at the sacrifice of all his possessions. Therefore, who would be prepared to deliver his body to anyone, even if it were demanded by Lord Vishnu? Purport: it is said, Atmanam sarvato rakshet tato dharmam tato dhanam. One must protect his body. One must protect his body by all means. Then he may protect his religious principles, and thereafter his possessions. This is the natural desire of all living entities. No one wants to give up his body unless it is forcibly given away. Even though the demigods said that they were demanding Dadhici's body for their benefit in accordance with the order of Lord Vishnu, Dadhici superficially refused to give them his body. Verse number 5. Shri Deva Uchuhu Kimnu Tad Dushyajam Brahman Pumsam Bhutanukampinam Bhavad Vidhanam Mahatam Punya Shlokedya Karmanam. The demigods replied, O exalted Brahmana, pious persons like you, whose activities are praiseworthy, are very kind and affectionate to people in general. Why can't such pious souls give for the benefit of others? They can give everything, including their bodies. Verse number 6, we will chant. Nunam swartha paroloko Naveda parasankatam Yadi vedana yacheta Neti naha yadishvaraha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Those who are too self-interested beg something from others, not knowing of others' pain. But if the beggar knew the difficulty of the giver, he would not ask for anything. Similarly, he who is able to give charity does not know the beggar's difficulty, for otherwise he would not refuse to give the beggar anything he might want as charity. Purport. This verse describes two people, one who gives charity and one who begs for it. A beggar should not ask charity from a person who is in difficulty. Similarly, one who is able to give charity should not deny a beggar. These are the moral instructions of the Shastra. Chanakya Pandit says, Sannimitte varam tyago vinashe niyate sati. Everything within this material world will be destroyed, and therefore one should use everything for good purposes. If one is advanced in knowledge, he must always be prepared to sacrifice anything for a better cause. At the present moment, the entire world is in a dangerous position under the spell of a godless civilization. The Krishna consciousness movement needs many exalted, learned persons who will sacrifice their lives to revive God consciousness throughout the world. We therefore invite all men and women advanced in knowledge to join the Krishna consciousness movement and sacrifice their lives for the great cause of reviving the God consciousness of human society. So we have started a new chapter today, the battle between the demigods and Vritrasura. A huge, one of the biggest battles fought during the Satya Treta time. And in the previous verse, previous chapter, we saw how the appearance of the demon Vritrasura and how the demigods were helpless because he was a very powerful demon, no match for the demigods were no match for the demon Vritrasura. So they prayed to the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord, being pleased with their prayers, appeared, and he spoke of pure devotional service. First he spoke of, he said that the demigods should not have asked to protect their bodies because I have myself appeared, and then you should have asked for me pure devotional service, which I could have granted. So that was, the Lord appeared and spoke on pure devotional service. But nevertheless, to address the concern of the demigods wanted to protect themselves from Vritrasura. So finally, the Supreme Lord Narayana gave them a solution. And the solution was, you should go and meet the Brahmana, Dadhici, and beg from him his body. That means ask him his life. Beg from him his body, and and after he gives up his body, from the bones of Dadhici, you should go to Vishwakarma. Vishwakarma is the architect, we know. And Vishwakarma will prepare a special thunderbolt from the bones of Dadhici. And that thunderbolt will be able to kill Vritrasura. Very unique arrangement. And what was so special about the bones of Dadhici that would kill the demons Vritrasura? Because Dadhici had chanted the Narayana Kavacha mantra, and it was through him that it came to Twasta and Vishwarupa and then to the demigods. He was the original person. So because Dadhici had chanted the Narayana Kavacha shield, the mantra, the names, holy names of Narayana, his body was very strong and his bones were very strong. And it was not just the bones per se which would kill, it was actually the mantra which was infused in his body, which made his body powerful. And finally, it was that was the real cause which would kill Vritrasura. So you can see the power of the holy name. That's why there's nothing that the holy name cannot do. Holy name can do anything. So this was the advice given, and the verse starts off, the first verse says, the Lord gave this advice and disappeared. And now we begin this chapter. So in this chapter, we see that the Devatas, as per the directions, have approached Dadhici and they are begging from him his body. So Dadhici, he was very liberal, and when the demigods begged for him his body, he partially agreed, and just to hear what is religious principles, he spoke to them. He smilingly and jokingly speaks to them. And then he says, you're asking me for my body? Bones means you're asking me for my body? Don't you know the pain that I will have to undergo to give up my body? And then further he says, everyone is very much, everyone wants to protect his body. Who would want to give up his body even if it is demanded by the Supreme Lord Vishnu? Today anybody comes and asks us, can you give up your body? We will say no, because bodies are very dear to us. And then the order in which we protect our things is mentioned here. Dadhici says that first we all want to protect our body, then we want to protect our religious principles. If you're living, then dharma has to be protected. And then finally, we want to protect our possessions, our belongings. So this is the order. So when Dadhici is speaking like this, then the Devatas start speaking. And then they say that you are such a pious soul, you are a Brahmana. What is it that you can't give up? A pious soul, a knowledgeable person like you, can actually give up anything, including your bodies. So, and then the last verse that we chanted today, it's a very nice instruction, and then Prabhupada quotes Chanakya Pandit, the verse. He supports this Bhagavatam verse with the Chanakya Pandit's verse. So today's verse is, those who are too self-interested beg something from others, not knowing of others' pain. But if the beggar knew the difficulty of the giver, he would not ask for anything. So this verse is talking about two things. The beggar who is begging for charity and the giver who is giving charity. So there are two things. One who gives charity and one who begs for it. And it is described, a beggar should not ask charity from a person who is in difficulty. So ideally this charity should not have been asked, because you ask this charity to give the bones, to give your body, nobody would give, because everybody would be in difficulty. But then they asked because the Lord had ordered. So that was the purpose. And similarly, this is from the person who is begging. We should not ask anyone anything if we feel that it's going to be difficult for him to give. So that's one instruction that we must remember. Similarly, one who is able to give charity should not deny a beggar. But if someone has asked me something, I must try my best to give. I must not deny what is being asked, including to the extent of giving up my life. That is the point that comes out in this verse, that an intelligent person must be ready to sacrifice anything when it is being asked. And from there, Prabhupada writes this purport, a very nice purport. He says that everything within the material world will be destroyed, and therefore one should use everything for good purpose. So our body is also going to get destroyed one day. So if while living I can use my body for something, I must use it. I must sacrifice my body. Giving up means sacrificing. And then Prabhupada writes, if one is advanced in knowledge, he must be prepared to sacrifice anything for a better cause. At the present moment, the entire world is in a dangerous position under the spell of godless civilization. Now Prabhupada is writing what we should sacrifice as devotees, and he addresses this in the purport. We invite all men and women. So everyone, all men and women. It's not just like, it's like everyone. So we must be prepared to sacrifice anything for the better cause, and at present, the entire world is in a dangerous position because of the spell of godless civilization. The Krishna consciousness movement needs many exalted, learned persons who will sacrifice their lives to revive God consciousness throughout the world. We therefore invite all men and women advanced in knowledge to join the Krishna consciousness movement and sacrifice their lives for the great cause of reviving the God consciousness of human society. So here Dadhici is going to sacrifice his life. He is practically sacrificing his body, life. And similarly, Prabhupada is saying, even a devotee, all men and women must sacrifice his life. For what purpose? Dadhici was doing it to save the demigods, just the demigods alone. But we have to sacrifice our lives to save the entire human society, which is right now suffering under the spell of godless civilization. Therefore, there is a great need to revive the God consciousness of human society. So, Prabhupada is saying this to his disciples, to his devotees, and this is an important instruction, that at least if we sacrifice our life for spreading this message of Krishna consciousness, means sacrificing a life for the spiritual master, because this order is of the spiritual master. A devotee should be prepared to do anything to sacrifice his life for the spiritual master. Even to the point, now here Dadhici's point was sacrificing his body. That means ready to die. Here Prabhupada is saying we should be ready to sacrifice our life. Right? But so there's one letter of Srila Prabhupada, a very nice letter, where Prabhupada brings out this point, how a devotee should be ready to sacrifice his life, in the sense he should be ready to die. I'll read this letter. Sorry, this is not a letter, this is a Bhagavatam purport. In the 4th canto, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. He would rather die than fail to execute. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principle of religion, so also his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Not just take charge and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. 2 times Prabhupada is saying, actually 3 times. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. So 3 times in this letter, Prabhupada is saying he should be ready to lay down his life, die with the spiritual master, and execute the mission of the spiritual master properly, and abandon all personal conditions. See, generally this is what restricts us, our personal consideration, our personal thinking, but no, nothing, everything should be aside. We know that story of the Bombay, how Prabhupada won back that land from Mr. Nair. You know, how there was one devoted person, devoted to Prabhupada, how he actually did this to get back the land. And there are so many instances, actually during the 1965 and 1977, we see so many stories where devotees, at that time the movement was going on in one tangential, it was like an exponential rise it was there. Because everybody was in that, everybody was in that mood. We are ready to do anything for the spiritual master. We know that incidents of the Chaitanya Charitamrita printing. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada had stayed whole night, he was translating from 12 a.m. to 12 midnight to 4 a.m. And Prabhupada had kept aside Srimad Bhagavatam because Prabhupada was concerned that I have very little time. I must give the Chaitanya Charitamrita to everyone in this world. So he finished translating Chaitanya Charitamrita very quickly, in a span of about 1.5 years. Prabhupada was translating, he had translated small books, and then he had started translating Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the 1970s, early 70s, 70, 71, he started on the Chaitanya Charitamrita translation, and within 1972, mid-72, within 1.5 years, he finished the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita translation. And then he had given it to the BBT devotees. Rameshwara Prabhu was the one overseeing the BBT and the publication and the printing. And there was one more devotee with him, Dasa. And then Prabhupada was waiting for this Chaitanya Charitamrita translation to come out, and it had not come out. And Prabhupada was in a morning walk with his devotees. Rameshwara was there, Radha Vallabh was there, and he was taking his morning walk on the Los Angeles beach. And then Prabhupada actually was very disturbed that the Chaitanya Charitamrita book has not been published yet. And then so he asks his publishers, Rameshwaram and all were there, so how long will you take to print the Chaitanya Charitamrita? So at that time, the speed at which BBT was printing the books of Prabhupada was one book. They were all standard books, 400 pages. Bhagavatam, during Prabhupada time, this was the standard. Generally, it is the standard. So they were printing one book at the rate of 4 to 6 months per book was being printed. So because now Prabhupada was urging them, it should happen quickly. Please tell me how much time you will take. So they thought, they did some calculation. They were all walking, morning walk. They were pausing, walking. They did some calculation and they said, Prabhupada, if you want this to be printed quickly, I think we can do one book every 2 months. So from 4 to 6 months to 2 months, it's like reducing the time by 50%. And then Prabhupada heard this. He was continuing to walk. And then he said, one book in 2 months? And then devotees felt that, no, Prabhupada is still not happy. He wants still faster, but how much can we reduce? So one devotee said that, one of them said, okay, we will try our best to do one book every 1 month. From 4 to 6 months. Prabhupada was still not happy. Prabhupada said, I want all 17 volumes in 2 months. And then when devotees heard this, they thought 1 in 2 months or 1 month they can do, and Prabhupada is saying one book, all 17 books in 2 months. That Radha Vallabh, it was him, he just spontaneously blurted out, Prabhupada, that's impossible. Actually, if you calculate, abandon all personal consideration. He had made a calculation, it's impossible. Prabhupada was walking, he stopped on the beach, and he was with his walking stick, and he pressed his stick hard on the sand, and he said, impossible is found in a fool's dictionary. The word impossible is found in a fool's dictionary. He was not happy. I want it in 2 months. And devotees were all stunned. There was silence everywhere because it was an impossible task. From 4 months to 2 months, all 17 volumes. It was impossible. That's what devotees were thinking. But Prabhupada wanted it in 2 months. And who is saying this? The spiritual master is saying this. So devotees there were looking at each other's eyes. Is it possible? And then that devotee recollects, we were considering our personal considerations, our calculation. We did not realize that who is speaking? The spiritual master, the resident of the spiritual world is speaking. If he is speaking something, it is possible. It is practically possible. And then the whole thing, they start, while they are walking, all this quick thinking, and because now the thinking is different. Earlier the thinking was, I cannot do anything beyond this time. Now the thinking is, it is possible to do. So how it is possible to do, let us think. So they made up their mind, since Prabhupada is saying it is possible in 2 months, it is possible. And then they worked out, and there's a very nice recollection by the devotees, how the devotees did a calculation. They were working 6 to 8 hours a day. They said, we have to work in 3 shifts, 24 hours a day. And the BBT printing press has to run 24 hours a day. And that time the BBT was divided between Los Angeles and, not divided, there were BBT presses. Some people compositing and art devotees were sitting in New York. Some were sitting, printing, publishing was in Los Angeles. And they told Prabhupada, we have to fly down all the devotees from New York to Los Angeles. We have to consolidate everything here in 2 months if you want all 17 volumes. And many such permissions they sought. Prabhupada approved everything. Okay. And they got devotees from New York. They got some cooks, so that he would take care of cooking and feeding the devotees. And devotees were working day and night in 3 shifts. And there was one devotee, one Mataji, who was not eating or sleeping practically. So one devotee went and told Prabhupada, Prabhupada, this Mataji, it appears she is not even eating and sleeping. She's just working. She was doing compositing work. So Prabhupada says, yes, she's running on spiritual energy. And like that, they worked for 2 months, and the last volume, the 17th volume, came out on the last day of the 2-month cycle. All the books were ready. And Prabhupada was so happy. And then the devotee said, we realized, the devotees said that, I tell you, that was so nectarian. We were staying up in the night time on irregular schedules just to keep it around the clock. All composers, the composing machines, and things like that. And then they recollect, we gave up everything. And somehow it happened. This was a very happy time. Everyone was feeling that there is nothing we can't do now. We can spread this movement anywhere in the world. There was no limitation on anything. That's how we were feeling. Not just the devotees who immediately were involved, but devotees all over the world, because the story spread everywhere. So devotees all over the world were feeling that there are no material restraints or limitation. So it was really a great moment for everybody to expand their book distribution with their convincing people to join the temple. It was just one of those great times. So, this is how a devotee, so in the same way, and our literatures, our scriptures are filled with such umpteen examples where a devotee is ready to sacrifice anything for the pleasure of the spiritual master or for the pleasure of the Lord. And when you do that, you become glorious, you become noted by the spiritual master, by the Supreme Lord. But that effort must be put, keeping all personal considerations aside. Bali Maharaj, when he came to know that Lord Vishnu has personally come and he is actually going to take away everything, just imagine a situation. He knew everything, that everything from me, the Lord will take away everything from me. But still he agreed to give up everything. Mrigari, hunter, when Narad Muni told him, you have to follow, if you want to get freed from this sinful reaction, you have to follow what I say. Are you ready to follow what I say? He said, yes. So the first thing that I am going to tell you is, give up your bow and arrow, destroy your bow and arrow immediately. So he was thinking, bow and arrow, if I give up, then who will maintain me? Because bow and arrow only, with that was his weapon, to kill the animals and sell them and things like that. And Nara said, don't worry, I will take care. So he believed in the words so he completely surrendered. And that's what Krishna is saying. Just surrender to me. We fail in surrendering because of personal considerations. What will happen to this? What will happen to that? There will be this difficulty, there will be that difficulty. In this difficult situation, how will I surrender? Let my situation improve. No. In any situation, devotees have faced trials and tribulations and still they have surrendered. If you look at the life of the Pandavas, the head of the 5 brothers, Yudhishthira, is Dharmaraj. Then he has 2 brothers, Arjuna and Bhima, who are the best of the warriors. And then along with that, they have Draupadi, the goddess of fortune. So look at the situation. Dharmaraj The most powerful warriors on earth, Arjuna and Bhima, and goddess of fortune personally with them, and over and above this, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is their best friend. Still so many difficulties. And still they surrendered. So that's why Krishna is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshishyami Ma Shuchaha. Do not fear. When Krishna is promising, what fear should we have? That means there is lack of faith. We don't surrender because we have some of a conception, but Krishna is saying, I am promising you this. So that is why if we want to surrender like that, how do we start? We have to start very seriously from these small steps. That's why this 9, that faith, Ado Shraddha, Tatha Sadhu Sangha, Atha Bhajana Kriya, Tato Anartha Nivritti. So why we are not able to surrender like this to this for the spiritual master, for the mission of the spiritual master? Because we have not developed that faith. So if we follow the rules and regulations strictly, the vidhi, Prabhupada in one lecture says, he gives a good example, you have the state legislative assembly. What is the state legislative assembly called? It's called the Vidhan Sabha. We have Vidhan Saudha here. So, what is the meaning of Vidhan Saudha? Why is it named Vidhan Sabha? Vidhan means those rules that have been enacted by the state, the rules and regulation, and everyone must follow it. So similarly, we must, if we want to surrender like that to the spiritual master and to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we must follow the vidhi, all following the rules and regulations given in the scriptures and strictly abiding by it. And then when we do that, one day we will be able to surrender. But we must be convinced that I must surrender. So, this entire thing, Krishna is telling me to surrender fully. I must surrender. So, if I have to surrender fully, I must follow all the rules and regulations. And then you see, initially even Arjuna was not willing to surrender. But Arjuna finally surrendered after hearing all the instructions from the Supreme Lord Krishna. So, similarly, we must also, take to this reading of Bhagavad. This is one of the vidhi. Every day, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. This is one of the vidhi, very important vidhi. And then how did Krishna surrender? He surrendered completely. As Prabhupada says, in one place he says that actually Krishna asked Arjuna to fight. So in the end he should have said, okay Krishna, you wanted me to fight, I will fight. But Arjuna's surrender was so nice. He did not just say, Krishna, I will fight. He says, Krishna, karishye vachanam tava. Vachanam tava means not just your words that I should fight, I am ready to follow all instructions of yours, including fighting. All instructions I am ready to do. This is surrender. This is sacrificing the life for the spiritual master. So, how do we sacrifice? So following the rules, following the regulations, reading, chanting, this is the sacrifice that we have to do. In Kali Yuga, the best sacrifice is Sankirtana, Yagne Sankirtana Prayer, Yajantihi Sumedhasa. If you are intelligent, if you take to this one sacrifice very strictly, sacrifice means what? Doing something, just like Dadhici is going to sacrifice his body for the pleasure of the Devatas. Similarly, we have to do something for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. That is sacrifice. If I sacrifice something for you, that means I have to do something that pleases you. So the thing that pleases most Krishna is the holy name. And that if we chant nicely, life is very short. We must know that we have very little time. So we must take to the sacrifice of chanting in all earnestness, very seriously. Jivana anitya jano sar, tahe nana pravidha vipada bhar. Jivan, this instruction, we must always remember that any moment anything can happen to me. Jivana anitya janoho sar. This is the essence that life is very short. Tahe nana vidha vipada bhar. And life is very short. In that short life also, innumerable difficulties. What time, when we will give up the life, we don't know. And so what we should do? Namashraya karo, jatane tumi. Take shelter of the holy name with all seriousness. Jatane tumi. The same instruction Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridha vrataha. Not just chanting, but chanting yatantascha, yatane tumi. Thakoho apana kaje. And remain in whatever position you are. But in that position, do not compromise on taking up the chanting very seriously. This is the sacrifice. So if we chant like Prabhupada says, if a devotee has chanted nicely, his preaching will have effect. So this is the instruction, and just one or two quotes from Srila Prabhupada. As we make sincere effort to perform this yagna, particular yagna for the sage, then we make our progress. Sincere effort to perform this yagna, then we make our progress. It is the most, and is this difficult? It is the most inexpensive. Three things Prabhupada said. It is the most inexpensive and very easy and very powerful. Most inexpensive and very easy and very powerful. Why don't you adopt it? That is my request. Another quote. Sacrifice is meant to please Lord Vishnu. Yagne sankirtana prayer yajantihi sumedhasaha. In Kali Yuga, those who are intelligent perform the sankirtana yagna. And then he writes, one should follow this process of Sankirtana Yagna conscientiously. Conscientiously, the dictionary meaning is diligently, meticulously, carefully, thoroughly, painstakingly. Naam ashraya karo, yatane tumi. So Prabhupada is inviting all men and women to sacrifice their life for spreading this Krishna consciousness and saving the godless civilization. The first sacrifice, this is our first sacrifice, taking up this process of chanting very nicely. For then, preaching, purity is the force, preaching is the essence. Prabhupada is asking us, preach, deliver the whole people, godless civilization. Preaching is the essence. But before that, purity is the force. If purity is there, that will happen. And for purity is the force, we have to take to this process of Naam Ashraya Karo, Yatane Tumi. So we'll end here. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Piman.